Hi guys, welcome to 10ish Books in 10ish Minutes with Ms. Mancini. I'm here today to help you try to figure out a book to pick for independent reading. I've come up with 10 different books, all of different genres, all of different styles, all of different character and author representation, and hopefully amongst this whole list you'll find something you might be interested in reading. So the books I'm going to look at today are Bull, Eleanor and Park, Exit Pursued by a Bear, The Hazelwood, The Only Good Indians, The Poet X, Scythe, Six of Crows, the Track series, and What If It's Us. Any of these books that have an asterisk next to them are actually found in Actively Learn. Otherwise, you'll need to go either to the school library or your local library or order a copy in order to read these. All right, let's start our 10 minutes now. First up, we have Bull, which is a retelling of the Greek myth of the Minotaur, a monster that has a head of a bull and the body of a man. And in the original myth, the Minotaur was obviously the monster, but in this retelling, the Minotaur's father, the god of the sea, Poseidon, he's really the villain. And we get to hear about, the Minotaur's life from Asterion, the Minotaur's actual name, his point of view. And we learn about how he gets put into the labyrinth and how he gets out of the labyrinth, but all sort of with this sympathetic new view on an old-timey story. I would recommend this for anyone who likes Percy Jackson and the Olympians, verse novels, because this whole story is told in verse. It's like poems. It's a shifting point of view book, so you hear from the Minotaur, you hear from Poseidon, you hear from Hermes, the messenger god, who's hilarious, which is another reason to read it if you like humor, because a lot of it is actually very, very funny. Our second book is Eleanor and Park by Rainbow Rowell. This is the story of two misfits, Eleanor and Park. Eleanor is the new girl in town. She kind of gets picked on because she looks a little weird and she acts a little weird, but she has bright red hair, but she ultimately ends up befriending Park on the bus over a shared love of music and comics, and slowly but surely they develop a crush on one another and eventually become a couple. It's got sort of a bittersweet ending, but it's a very, very, very sweet book. And I would recommend it for anyone who likes stories about outcasts, romance minus the cheese, because while it is romantic, it's not cheesy romantic. Coming of age stories and 80s nostalgia, because the whole book is set in the 80s. So there's references to 80s music and 80s fashion and 80s comic books, including, importantly, the original Watchmen. On a very different sort of note is Exit Pursued by a Bear, a book about a girl named Hermione Winters who is on a cheer team that is locally very famous because they are very successful. They've won a number of competitions. And she goes to cheer camp to prepare for her senior year of cheering. And while there, she is drugged and sexually assaulted. So the book goes on to look at how she sort of pieces together what happens to her, but also how she goes from a victim to a survivor. And this is good for anyone who likes stories of characters overcoming adversity and trauma, strong female protagonists, anyone who likes subverting stereotypes, particularly those about cheerleaders, because these are not your average cheerleaders. The book Speak, it's very similar to Speak in terms of topic and portrayal of the main character, and realistic fiction, because this is very much a realistic fiction book. If you're not into realistic fiction, however, I would recommend The Hazelwood by Melissa Albert. This is a very, very, very dark reimagining of sort of fairy tales. So it's about a girl named Alice Crewe and her mom, Ella Porcupine. And they've been running for Alice's whole life from bad luck, quote unquote. And Alice's grandmother, Althea, who is this famed recluse who wrote this very strange book of fairy tales called Tales from the Hinterland. And eventually, Alice decides she wants to meet her grandmother and sort of figure out what happened between her and her mother. She enlists a friend named Ellery Finch to go on this sort of adventure to meet her grandmother, and a bunch of very surprising / scary things happen as a consequence of that. So this is very much a fantasy novel. It is very much a dark look at fairy tales. So if you like your fairy tales more like the Brothers Grimm than Disney, then this is for you. If you're a fan of the Red Queen series, that's often considered a read-alike to this. And if you want to get into a new series, because the Hazelwood is actually the first in a series of books Melissa Albert is basing in this world. Next, we have The Only Good Indians, which is a very, very recent book. It just came out towards the end of 2020. It is a story of 4 men from the Blackfoot tribe who are going to sort of have a reunion 10 years after they all killed together a number of elk on a forbidden part of their reservation. And as they are planning this reunion, a number of things happen that sort of indicate that a supernatural force is seeking retribution on them for what they did. It is a sort of slow burn book. It takes a while to figure out sort of what is happening, but it ultimately is a book full of plot twists. So if you're into those, I would definitely recommend this. It's also very much a horror book, though it doesn't seem like it at first. So if you're a Stephen King fan, I would highly recommend this. It also is about Indigenous people by an Indigenous author. So if you're interested in Indigenous representation, I would definitely get this book. And this is also a book that is technically an adult book, but it's written with appeal to a YA audience. It's actually nominated for an Alex Award, which is an award given to books that are adult books written that YA audiences can appreciate. So if that's kind of a book that interests you, if you want something that's maybe a little bit more mature, I would definitely recommend this. Next up, we have The Poet X. This is another verse novel, but it's very, very different from Bull. It is about a girl named Xiomara who lives in Harlem, and she has a hard time expressing herself, and as a consequence of that, starts to write poetry in a journal as a means of getting out her feelings. However, her mother does not approve of that or of her budding relationship with a boy at her school. So she has to sort of decide between pleasing her mom or sort of doing what's important to her, which is writing. If you like slam poetry, if you like novels with diverse representation, if you like coming of age stories, most of you just love beautiful writing. This is a beautifully written book. It's just got beautiful language. I would highly recommend this. This is probably one of the best books I've read in the last few years, particularly YA books. It's just a beautifully written, touching story of somebody growing up and expressing themselves. On an even different note, if you are a big fan of dystopia, I would highly recommend reading Neil Shusterman's Scythe. So this is a story about far into the future, where we have eliminated death. People no longer die. We can revive them. So to control the world's population, we've created a group of people called Scythes, whose job it is to glean, quote unquote, people, aka kill them to control the population. Into this world, 2 young people, Rowan Danish and Citra Terranova, are thrown as sort of as potential Scythes. They're like apprentices, and they have to ultimately decide and be chosen to become Scythes. But what we soon learn is that a world where death doesn't exist is not necessarily a good world, and Rowan and Citra have to make some important decisions about whether or not they want to participate in this sort of world. Again, it's a great dystopian speculative fiction. It has very detailed world building. Like, there's all sorts of important little things that Shusterman includes, including the fact that the entire world is more or less controlled by a computer called the Thunderhead. So this is how they prevent people from dying. The Thunderhead takes care of it. It is the first in a series. So if you're interested in getting to the whole series, I definitely recommend this. And if you're interested in memorable villains, because there is a very, very memorable villain in this, his name is Scythe, and he is a sadist. So part of what this book is grappling with is what happens when someone who loves to torture people has the power to kill anyone they want to. Another sort of fantasy sci-fi, but of a totally different kind, is Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. This is just a really fun book. I would highly recommend it for anyone who likes flashy action sequences, because this book is basically an action movie in a book. So it takes place in the fictional land of Ketterdam, and it focuses on a group of misfit criminal bad types led by a guy named Kaz Brecker. And they are approached by a local merchant to pull off a crime that no one else believes is doable. But Kaz believes that him and his crew, all of whom have special talents, can pull off this crime. And then the rest of the book is about whether or not they can. It is a total adventure. It has these amazing set piece scenes where crazy things happen. It has an awesome mix of characters, and I just think it's a lot of fun. It's a great book to read right now because it is going to be adapted as part of the Shadow and Bone series coming to Netflix in April. So if you're someone who likes to read the book before they see the movie, I would highly recommend this. It's also a book that has really diverse representation. Every member of Kaz's crew represents sort of a different type of person from a different place. Even though this is a fictional world, you can see how Bardugo pulls in things from our world and sort of mashes them up in there. It's a really fun book. I really highly recommend it. Next, remember I said 10-ish books, and because of that, my next thing is the Track series by very, very popular YA author Jason Reynolds. He's sort of famous for the books Look Both Ways and A Long Way Down, which you might be familiar with, but the Track series is really the first thing he wrote that really got him famous. These are a series of books starting with Ghost about a inner city track team. And while each book focuses on a different member of the team and every member is different, what they all share is their love of running. It is another verse novel, just like The Poet X and Bull. It is also realistic fiction, like some of the others I've mentioned, but it's the one book that I've pointed out that's about sports. So it's for those of you who like reading about sports, I would really recommend this. They're pretty quick reads and they're a lot of fun, but they really talk about how different sports, in this case though, track mostly, but also talks about basketball and things, really matter to people and how sports can bring people together. And then last but not least, we have What If It's Us? By two authors, actually, Becky Albertalli and Adam Silvera. This is the story of Ben and Arthur, who meet in a post office randomly one day, and hijinks ensue when Arthur decides that he wants to find Ben after they're parted. The catch is they're in New York City, of all places, so that makes finding each other both incredibly difficult and very reliant on luck. Thankfully, both Ben and Arthur believe strongly in fate, and eventually they are brought back together. This is definitely a coming-of-age story, in part because they're young, they're teenagers, but also it's about them falling in love for the first time. This is an LGBTQ plus story, so if you like those sort of coming-of-age stories, or if you like something like Simon versus the Homo Sapien Agenda, you will probably like this book. Becky Albertalli, who wrote Simon and the Homo Sapien Agenda, also wrote this. Well, half of this, actually, because the story actually has two narrators. Both Ben and Arthur narrate the book. It switches between their points of view. And Becky Albertalli wrote Arthur's part, and Adam Silvera wrote Ben's part. So you sort of get two different characters and sort of two different styles in one book. It's definitely got a meet cute thing happening. So again, if you like your books a little bit romantic, this might be of interest to you. All right, I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, can feel free to email me at Lauren_Mancini@hcpss.org, and happy reading.